is that what we know for sure today is that every inch that China makes in artificial intelligence flows straight back to the People's Liberation Army. That there is no, it's not a hypothetical, that's a fact. And so our view is, we're not going to take the risk to actually fall behind in the AI race. And so our policy is to win the race. We will work hand in glove with our companies to make sure that technologies are developed in a responsible way. But as people in the startup community know, having pious principles doesn't matter if you're being outcompeted and you're going out of business. Actually, a number of our mutual friends in the tech industry used to joke that, things like AI safety doesn't matter if you're dead, because you have to first survive and then you can worry about a lot of other principles. And so that's our policy. We want to win the race for the country. We think our economy will be bigger and our military will be stronger if we actually are successful in this race, and ultimately the world will also be a much more secure place.
Are there specific technologies, Jacob, that you see as strategically important for the United States as it gets into a bit of a competitive tangle with China? And if so, those companies, is there some sort of a through things like Hill and Valley Forum? Are there things, platforms like that, which can inform people in the valley where there's so much innovation going on? Are there those regular avenues of communication that are going on between Washington and the valley, where people understand that, let's say if you're developing the next generation of EVs or drones or even underwater, as I'm looking right now, some underwater Navy related companies, where people actually have an easier path to speak to customers in potentially as better or something. Is there something like that we can go through? And would that be Hill and Valley kind of platform? What would that be?
Yeah, so I think the Hill and Valley has done a really great job at helping create that bridge. Obviously, right now the format is it's an annual event and an annual gathering. In full disclosure, I'm obviously no longer involved with the Hill and Valley Forum other than attending to speak. But Isaiah Mayers, who's in the audience today, actually runs it, and so I think it could be a great opportunity for you guys to explore perhaps expanding the cadence of engagement, and maybe it's not a bad idea to do something around AI, since obviously the AI issue is really becoming an important policy issue. I think the reason, if I could just say a couple words on why AI policy is so important for the future of our country. If you look at, if you believe that AI is productivity, it's likely to lead to a step change in our rate of growth as a country. And if you look back at history, at the last time that we had a major technological inflection point, I would argue during the first industrial revolution, you basically had this meta-level event called the Great Divergence, where the countries that industrialized started to grow a lot faster than the countries that weren't. Because growth compounds, the divergence happens on an almost exponential way, because growth compounds, the countries grow faster and faster, and so the economies start to diverge. What that means is the country that leads in AI will have a substantially larger economy and a much, much stronger military. And so the ramifications for the global distribution of power is actually really, really significant for our country. And so I can't stress that enough, because the decisions we make today will really shape the future of our country probably for the next several decades.
Is there, just as you speak about this, here's what's striking me right now, that we should probably start something called the Hill and Valley Institute, Jacob.
I'm a public servant, but I think Isaiah is got so much extra time on his side.
Isaiah is here. Those of you who are in the audience, Isaiah is going to be here with us for the next couple of hours. So we should definitely speak to him. But I think we should, I'm just thinking like a startup right now. We must have the Hill and Valley institute which actually becomes some kind of a clearinghouse for technologies emerging from the valley, which actually get quickly in front of the Washington DC powers that be. A lot of people in the audience, Jacob, they are founders and operators, and most of them are building around the model layer, the application layer, and the data and the inference layer. Where, in your view, in the Pax Silica stack, is the actual commercial opportunity for for a local founder here in the valley over the next 24 months? What would you say are what is the low-hanging fruit?
So, I think, first of all, let me answer that question into two parts. The first is, I think one of the draws of Pax Silica for a lot of our partners overseas lies in the fact that there are ways that countries can contribute at every layer of the supply chain stack. That we're seeing that the AI revolution contributes to over a third of GDP growth in the US. It's leading to record demands for chips, but also record demands for copper, record demands for cobalt, record demands for electricians, for all sorts of different things. And what that means is economic growth for countries that do lots of different things. So countries are looking to help, take a stake in this AI revolution by leveraging their unique contributions and comparative advantages and embedding themselves into the supply chain. So that's number one. I would look at, what are the parts of the supply chain where there is opportunity and where there is over-concentration in the market, which is probably in most segments of the supply chain today. Part number two is, I think the US and India share something really profound, which is there are two relatively young countries. India is a very young country, the US is relatively young. I think culturally, our young people have a generally very high appetite for risk. It's really, really interesting, the last couple times I've been in India, seeing the kind of drive and hunger that there is and ambition to take risks and build and build. And that is something that we tend to take for granted here in Silicon Valley as being normal, but it actually is a lot more unique than we would expect. And there is a reason that there aren't that many Silicon Valleys around the world, despite the best efforts of many governments. And so I think in America, culturally, we have always, to some extent, been a nation of underdogs. We started out as 13 colonies that rebelled against an empire. We're a country that decade after decade, the experts kind of predicted the limitations of our power, whether it was the Iraq War, the Great Financial Crash, the Vietnam War, the list goes on, COVID. And, our country performs really, really well when our backs are against the wall and America kind of goes into overdrive. And fundamentally, that really is the essence, that underdog mentality is the essence of Silicon Valley. Because every founder has experienced at one point or another a time when they started out with an idea that was considered heretical and perhaps sometimes even ridiculed by the expert class. Every founder has gone through 50 or 60 no's before they got to a yes. And it's that kind of perseverance that really leads to incredible momentous change. And in India, because of its youthful population and its appetite to really seize on this historic moment that India can capitalize on, I think there really is an extraordinary opportunity and perhaps a once-in-a-generation opportunity for the US and India to really achieve momentous things together.
I'm going to ask you a slightly, thank you, yes. Slightly tricky question now, Jacob, which is economic statecraft, right? China has the Belt and Road Initiative, which it has deployed as economic statecraft, as a way of influencing policies in foreign countries. Does the US have stomach for something like that, or do we prefer, taking a shortcut, and maybe even taking military action as we are taking right now in Iran? Is that something that you think we could run into some hiccups as we go forward? How are we doing economic statecraft?
So, I mean, in an interesting way, I think one of the interesting, one of the clear evident takeaways from the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz is the need to de-risk single points of failures. I think, generally speaking, our administration has been very attuned to choke points that the global economy is overly dependent on, and I can definitely say without a doubt that the whole region is now very, very aware that that is a single point of failure that needs to be de-risked for the long term. But it's not the only single point of failure that the global economy is based on. There are other straits that also have over-concentration. Aside from logistics, there's also industrial choke points. And ultimately, that's really why we decided to launch Paxilica, to actually have a much more collaborative approach and an ecosystems-based approach to building together and de-risking those choke points in the process. The genesis of Paxilica, I'd also like to add is, on the one hand, to de-risk choke points, but I think one of the reasons why we've encountered a lot of success and interest by a lot of countries is actually not the defensive aspect of it, the idea that we're against choke points or that we're simply looking to mitigate risk. I think part of a big part of the appeal has actually been the aspirational, positive vision for the future that Paxilica offers. It's because I think people see that it's an opportunity to build a totally new supply chain that's AI native and that's futuristic. And what should the supply chain look like if you build it with 2026 technology? And I think it's that sense of possibility that's actually been very exciting to not just governments, but also companies from our respective ecosystems. So we're looking at the opportunity of making a big play in logistics in a way that's completely autonomous, and approaching industrial activity in a way that's AI native. And I think that aspect is really central to what we're doing, and ultimately a very big part of why people are actually interested in pursuing this.
I'm going to ask you about what you're doing in Philippines, but before that, I just wanted to mention to the audience here that there's a massively large fund and sovereign funds that are coming together that we should be tapping into in Silicon Valley for technologies that are geopolitical in nature, defense, security, climate, and things like that. I wanted to ask you, Jacob, about you announced something called the Forward Deployed Industrial Base last week. Can you tell us what it is? And you also described statecraft as a product. Will you please tell us more about what that means?
Yeah. So we worked very closely with the government of the Philippines to develop a first-of-its-kind economic security zone that will offer investors from the U.S. and from aligned countries investor protections that are guaranteed by the American common law system, combined with the unique industrial contributions and capabilities that the Philippines has to offer. And the idea is really testing something that a very unique, joint venture style approach, where we can have a model where both countries actually share in the upside and have skin in the game. So if the project goes really well, the Philippines and the U.S., both effectively have equity and share in the upside as well as share in the risk. And the idea is really to create an industrial hub that for the U.S., what we gain is we want to secure the inputs that we vitally need for our supply chains. For the Philippines, it's going to mean potentially really significant investments in industrial activity, very high quality, high paying jobs, and great opportunities for the ecosystem, the economic ecosystems in the Philippines. So we're really excited about the opportunity that this platform provides. We really do view it as a platform to accelerate industrial development. And the Philippines is our oldest ally in Asia. And so the combination of the values alignment that we have with the Philippines combined with the industrial complementarity that the Philippines offers, we think will make it a very, very compelling value proposition, not just for us, but also for companies to partner with us to do the build out in the Philippines.
So question, Jacob, does this mean that, I mean, is this also some sort of a geopolitical strategic action that we are taking, right? In the sense that if there was any turbulence in the, South China Sea, and there was any, conflict with Taiwan, then we are present now with the Philippines. And is that something that figured into the calculus of the administration?
So I really don't think that this is actually anything to do with the South China Sea per se. The decision was really just made based on the fact that the Philippines has a deep manufacturing ecosystem. It is an old American ally. We have a great relationship with the Philippines, and that's really the basis for this kind of arrangement. But with that being said, look, I mean, every supply chain decision, in my view, is a geopolitical decision. And I think countries are really becoming aware of that. And frankly, I think no one understands that better than India. I mean, India has been encircled by the Belt and Road Initiative for 25 years now. And so I think people are becoming very savvy about this. And we are obviously peace-loving people, but we want to compete just like anyone else. And I think it's a great thing. And I think one of the reasons why people like partnering with America is because our companies are actually private companies. They're not extensions of the US government. But more importantly, I think American companies and American founders have a very positive sum view of the world, where our companies already have joint ventures and strategic partnerships with companies everywhere. Korea, Japan, India. And so, the basic worldview is the pie, by partnering with other people, we're going to grow the pie together. And that's, I think, really part of the appeal is if the pie grows together, there is a lot of opportunity to go around for everyone. It's not about, trying to basically, what I get, you lose. It's really not the way that American technology companies think. I think everyone in this room knows that, obviously, being here in Silicon Valley, and I think it's really part of the appeal for why people like working with the US.
We will be opening a very important Thai corridor into Silicon Valley through Jacob. I want you guys to know that we must leverage people like Jacob, who we know well and we appreciate and respect, to give us an in into what's happening in Washington, because all those policy decisions being taken there have a direct impact on what's happening on the ground here in terms of startup opportunities, policy decisions, and the kind of fund allocation that happens on everything from climate to energy to critical minerals. So please watch out for that. And with that, I would like to thank Jacob for coming here from Washington DC, spending this time with us, and we will be heading out from here. So you might be able to get a minute or two with him before he heads to San Francisco. But we are very grateful, Jacob, for your visit to us, and we look forward to working with your team here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Jacob. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. I want to take this opportunity to thank Asha. She's been a fabulous supporter over the years, not just to Thai and TieCon, but to the emerging ecosystem across the world. And she's been instrumental in building the bridge between India and US especially. And that's where we reached out to Jacob. It's a pleasure to have you here, and thank you for taking the time and coming here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.